So what did Jesus pray the last night of his life? You would think that if Jesus is going to pray something literally the night before he's going to be crucified, then it's probably an important prayer. It's probably something we should take note of. In the book of John, we find this prayer. And note that through the book of John, we see several things. For instance, we see a lot about salvation in John chapter 3. By the time you get to John chapter 10, he mentions something. It's called the sheep and the shepherd. And of course, in this context, you're looking into John chapter 10, Jesus Christ is the chief shepherd. He is the good shepherd. So when we think about that, we think about the fact that unity is not something, and this kind of goes along with the video I posted last week if you watch these videos regularly, but unity, it's not something that we create, it's something we keep. And unity in the church is created by Jesus Christ. We should all believe on Jesus Christ and all follow Jesus Christ, and the unity is already created. It's created through the Spirit. It's created through Jesus Christ, through God the Father, through that Trinity in itself, which shows us that unity not only is possible, but that it is important. The fellowship is important. And God wanted us to see this through the Trinity. So Jesus, as the chief shepherd, allows this unity to happen. But as we get on, you see chapter 13, he's talking to the disciples there, and he tells them, that you have to serve one another. And he says, a new commandment I give you, that you love one another. By the time he gets to chapter 17, he's at the last night of his life on earth before he would be crucified. And he starts out as a prayer in chapter 17. Now, I'm not going to go into the first parts of it, just a couple verses really we'll look at here. But in chapter 17, verse number 1, he says, when Jesus had spoken these words, he lifted up his eyes to heaven and said, Father, the hour has come, glorify your Son. So he starts out essentially praying for himself. And in prayer, ours kind of works like this as well. A lot of times we might pray for something that we need or we want. Maybe shouldn't pray for what we want, but it's okay to pray for what we want. And Jesus here is praying that he would be glorified. He's praying for himself, and he goes from there to the disciples. And he starts to pray for the disciples, and that is his closest friends. And for us, we see this same circle. A lot of times you might pray for yourself, then you pray for your family and your close loved ones and your friends. And then from there, Jesus basically prays for the world. Now note what he's going to pray for, which goes into what I said about John chapter 10. In chapter 17, he says, I do not ask for these only, verse number 20, but for also all those who will believe in me through their word, that they may all be one, just as you, Father, are in me and I in you, that they also may be in us. On Jesus' last night on the earth, he doesn't pray for their success. He doesn't pray that they would be well known. He doesn't pray for their safety. He doesn't say, God, I want you to really bless their life and give them everything they need. Supply them with a good job. Supply them with plenty of money so that they could have all that they need to eat. Supply them with lots of friends. That's not what he prays. Jesus prays on his last night on earth, God, I pray that they may be one. Now, if you remember from chapter 13, Judas Iscariot, and in that area of John, Judas Iscariot has already left by chapter 17. Judas Iscariot was the one who kissed Jesus, obviously, and he's the one who would bring condemnation down on Jesus, who would bring the crucifixion through him, the one that Jesus literally, when he kissed him, he says, at one time when they're around the table, says, that they'll do us too quickly. This Judas Iscariot is gone, but yet Jesus looks at his disciples and he says, I pray that you will be one. No doubt there were a lot of those disciples that were with him at the time that Judas had betrayed him, that they were wondering, who else? No doubt they would wonder, how can I trust this one or get along with that one? Jesus prays that they will be one. Jesus prays for their unity, something that we see is very hard to come by in Christianity. Something where we see literally thousands of different, religions, not necessarily religions, but in Christianity we see all these different little factions, whether it's Baptist or Presbyterian denominations, whatever you want to call it, but it's still the same thing. It's just, and so much of Christianity wants to argue. And Jesus says, I pray that they will be one. Something about this prayer that really is somewhat troubling is that, and in some ways it's troubling, in other ways it's like, oh, okay, well, he's showing us this example. In other words, it's not been answered. To a large extent, although Jesus is praying to God that they would be one, are we one? Are we in unity? Sometimes our prayers may not be answered, but we still pray for that. We should still be praying for that. We should still be in communication with God. But notice why he says this unity is important. Same verse. That also may be in us, so that... Okay, let's start over in verse number 21. That they may all be one, just as you, Father, are in me, and I in you, that they also may be in us, so that the world may believe that you have sent me. He says, listen, if they will be one, if you and I will be one, if we will be in unity, and listen, there's a huge difference in just going along with whatever happens and being in unity. There's a big difference in everybody being exactly the same and being in unity. Our unity comes through Jesus Christ. Our unity comes in that foundation of beliefs, what he is, what he does. And he says, if we will be in unity, if we, won't argue so much over the little things and just look at Jesus Christ and look what he has done and what he has come to do and what we need to be doing to reach in a lost and dying world, if we will be in unity about that, he says, I want you to be in unity so that the world may know. He wants the world to know. And if anything will convince a lost and dying world that Jesus is real, that God sent his son, if something will convince them, it is looking at us and our unity and not at the divisions. 50 years ago, if you want to know about religion, you might have found a commentary. You might have probably just looked at for a pastor or maybe a father or mother and asked them about it. And they would have told you what they know. They would have told you what they believe. And so the unity in that sense was a little bit easier. But now, and there's no getting away from it, now anybody from a 3-year-old to whoever can just Google Christianity, what we believe, and you have the world at your fingertips. And it can be quite confusing to someone who has not been brought up, who's not been taught. They don't know what to believe. They look at us and say, they are so messed up and so disunified, if that's a word, that they don't get along. They all disagree, and they don't know who's Christian, who's not. They don't know the difference in Islam and Christianity, or Buddhist and or Mormon or Jehovah's Witness and Christianity, Seventh-day Adventist. It all gets just grouped in there, and nobody really knows what's going on unless you've really studied it, unless you really have a foundation. And Jesus says, be one, so that they may believe. I think that Jesus put great importance on this subject of unity. And I just prayed. We'll struggle. Yes, I understand there's differences, and there needs to be some differences, culturally, different things. But we can still pray and struggle for unity, to get along with those who we may disagree with. If they believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God, that he died for your sins, then we can have unity in that. We can have unity in reaching others because of that, because of Jesus Christ who died and gave his life for us. I don't have all the answers. I don't claim to, but I do know this. Jesus, on his last night, this was so important that he said, God, Father, please unify them that the world may believe. So if it's that important to Jesus, I think maybe we should strive to obtain that, to reach for that unity that is possible through Jesus Christ. Until next time.